And it feels like Everton maybe dodged the bullet with John Textor not being the guy who ended up taking over instead of Dan Friedkin. Obviously, you mentioned how rumored he was to be the guy, and then all of a sudden Friedkin kind of came in at the last moments. Over to Newcastle, Paul. The Arsenal and Isak links are really, really heating up. Where do you think Newcastle goes from here? Aren't they supposed to be the richest club in the world? They shouldn't be forced to sell one of their stars, maybe their best player.
Well, that's FFP and PSR, isn't it? That's why we talk about it. I mean, this deal wouldn't have any kind of legs at all if the FFP and PSR wasn't the way it was. Newcastle building the way they were, I mean, they rose so rapidly to be in the Champions League. When you look at what they're doing this season, they're not so far off the top 3-4 places. You know, where they are in the Premier League, they're having a really good season, not being in Europe. And players like Isak are ones that they should be building a team around. And as you say, richest club in the world, potentially being almost arm-locked into selling one of their best players. By the way, on a different subject, did you see his goal midweek for Sweden that was ruled out for offside? If you've not seen it, look it up on social media. It's an absolute joke, by the way. And that was VAR. That was VAR. But no, listen, we talk about that. Those are the types of goals that he can score. And those are the links that they're going to get him to places like Arsenal. I think Arsenal do need a number 9. We talk about it quite often. We talk about it all the time. I do think Arsenal are in desperate need of a number 9. Yes, they've had a blip in form, etc. But I think you say that they score goals from all over the team. But when they don't, can you imagine what they'd score with a number 9? Somebody like Isak would fit into the Arsenal side. Just struggle to see how Newcastle would strengthen one of the rivals. I think they'd fight tooth and nail to keep hold of him, I really do. And if they had to sell, I don't think it would be within the Premier League.
And we're obviously going to see Newcastle linked with all sorts of other strikers if it looks like Isak's got a foot out the door. That's just very common. Stefanos Tsimas is on the radar for Newcastle. Bit of a more unknown, younger signing. Does January make sense to try and get him in there, get him up to speed in case Isak does leave this summer? Pete, we've spoken a lot about them needing another striker.
We've always talked about them needing another striker. Newcastle's priority will be to keep hold of Alex Isak if they can. If they do have to sell him, you would think they would like to sign a proven striker who can fill his boots and go in and score the goals for Newcastle. But obviously, Newcastle are in the market for a young striker, someone who can maybe learn under the likes of Callum Wilson, under Alex Isak as well. They brought in Will Osula from Sheffield United. We've not seen a lot of him, but I think for the boy playing for Nuremberg right now, Simas, I think it would be a massive gamble if they were to move for him. Obviously, he's such a young player. He's just moved to Germany. He's playing in 2 Bundesliga right now as well, so he's not even playing at the highest level, but he has got a few clubs looking at him. It's believed we've had the likes of Tottenham and West Ham also credited with an interest in him, so I'm sure Newcastle are doing their homework on potential future signings, but I don't think they'll be rushing in to do any deal for the player in January, talking about maybe £15 million for him, which I think might be a bit rich as well. But I'm sure if he continues to score goals and performs well for Nuremberg, I'm sure then you might have clubs in the Premier League come calling for him in the summer.
Correct me if I'm wrong, he's only on loan, isn't he? He's on loan at Nuremberg from PAOK in Greece. Youngest ever scorer in PAOK's history when I looked at this morning. So he's got potential, but I mean, he's 18 years old. And if PAOK don't see him as a member of their first team squad, playing in the Europa League, we've seen him this season, if he's out on loan in Bundesliga 2, he's not somebody that the Premier League are going to go and pay big money for and stick him straight into the side. He's definitely one for the future, one that a lot of clubs will have on their radar. But as far as a big money January signing is going to go, if a club pays big money for him, it'll be in the summer, and he's definitely a future signing. In a similar way to like Bergvall at Tottenham, he's that type of player.
And Newcastle looking to make some reinforcements other places. We've talked about defenders prior, and we will talk about another defender, Paul, but Paul Pogba being linked in the news to a potential short-term deal at Newcastle. Thoughts? You think that could work out?
It's my favourite phrase. That's kite-flying journalism, probably from Paul Pogba or Paul Pogba's agent. I mean, you look at the amount of time that Paul Pogba's been out of football, so if you look at it sensibly, right? 2012 to 16 he was at Juve, 16 to 22 at Man United, 22 to 24 at Juventus, played 8 league games since 22. So you forget how long he's actually been out of football. He's now 31 years old, and if you're going to sign somebody and you bring him into your squad on the wages that he's going to demand, you're going to want an immediate impact. He's going to take time to adjust, to get fit again, to get to the levels that's required for the Premier League. Listen, you can live off your name for so long. Paul Pogba's got a great name in football, and I still think there is a player in there. But at 31 years old, you have to question his hunger, his desire, his want to do it. and he's going to have to prove it. He's not going to walk into a top club and be given an opportunity now because of the way that football is, how fit and strong that these players are, the pace the game is played at. He's going to have to earn his opportunity to play at the top level again. It's kite flying journalism, but because of Paul Pogba and the brand that he is, because of the CV he's got, because of the experience he's got, he's always going to get linked with top clubs. Not necessarily always him and his agent linking him with top clubs, but he's going to at some point going to have to get back in somewhere and prove his worth somewhere, and it's going to be a tough task for him. Can I see him going into Newcastle? No, I can't. In the same way as I can't see Jose Mourinho going back in there, going into there. I can't. I just can't see any, in benefit. Like, you look at Eddie Howe, you look at what he demands from his players. You ain't going to get that from Paul.
It's a non-starter for me as well. I just can't see it. Like Paul's mentioned, Paul Pogba undoubtedly on his day can be a world-class player, but he's just not an Eddie Howe type of signing for me at all. Eddie will want tried and trusted, and he will want players in the trenches with him as well. Paul Pogba is working his way back to fitness after being out of the game for so long, so I think the most likely avenue for Pogba is maybe a return to France, or maybe he goes and gets a lucrative move to the Saudi Pro League or the MLS. I think there would be the more viable options rather than a return to the Premier League for Paul Pogba.
Yeah, that's more realistic, isn't it? I mean, those two leagues, the Saudi Pro League or the MLS. But I mean, the brand Pogba is still there, so that may attract him. That may get him the opportunity in Europe somewhere at a club that's willing to take the chance on him. But for him, for where he thinks he should be playing at, and for what he brings off the field and the publicity he brings, maybe the Saudi Pro League or the MLS is going to be his best option.
No doubt about that. I mean, he obviously carries such a massive legacy, but haven't quite seen it in a few years now. Even maybe before the move to Juventus, he was struggling quite a bit with Manchester United as well. Pete, we know that Newcastle tried desperately to get in a top center back this summer. Thomas Araujo of Benfica is being linked with Newcastle, probably a next summer move as well. Do you think it's more likely they look outside the Premier League to try and get this deal done, seeing how hard it was?
Yeah, obviously we know they are continuing their hunt for a new centre-back in this upcoming January transfer window. Very frustrating for Newcastle that they couldn't push through that deal for Mark Gahey. I don't think they'll revisit it in January. It'll still be too expensive for them, and Crystal Palace won't want to lose Mark Gahey in January. Araujo from Benfica, a very highly rated young player, broken into the Portugal national team as well recently under Roberto Martinez. I think he's one for the future. We'll want to keep an eye on. I'm sure a number of top clubs across Europe are doing their homework on him right now as well. Newcastle, I think, obviously have shown a bit of interest in him. Crystal Palace tried to sign him in the summer transfer window, but were priced out of a deal, while Chelsea are also believed to be looking at Araujo, but he's got a huge release clause in his contract as well at Benfica, and we know Benfica, they do put these big release clauses on their best players. £84 million the release clause is. I don't see anybody paying that, definitely not in January, and I don't think many teams will be paying that in the summer either. So I think it's one where maybe Newcastle will continue to keep tabs on him, but the good news for Newcastle is that hopefully they can welcome back Sven Botman and Jamal Lascelles from those serious knee injuries at the turn of the year, and that will definitely bolster Eddie Howe's defensive options as well, because I think it's going to be hard to land probably their top defensive targets in the January transfer window, with money being tight with FFP and PSR.